Hello and welcome to You've Seen It Before, TV Reviews, Connections of Mine, and welcome back to another installment in my review and reaction series to each and every episode of Season 3 of the Orville New Horizons. If you've never seen one of my reaction episodes before, this is where I give my brief overview of the latest episode of whichever series I happen to be reviewing, what I thought worked and didn't work, my likes and dislikes, as well as some analysis at certain plot developments and character arcs that may seem familiar to you and where you may have seen them before. Just to get it out of the way, this will be a full spoiler review and reaction to the latest episode of the Orville New Horizons. So if you've not seen this latest episode yet, I highly recommend coming back when you have, because this will be full-on spoilers from here on out. So with that being said, without further ado, let's get into the Orville New Horizons Season 3, Episode 4, entitled Gently Falling Rain. Now the whole, the basic setup of this episode is that the Union and the Krill are preparing to sign a peace treaty. They already have a, mutual defense pact against the Kalon. Now we have the formal treaty signing that's about to happen, and the Chancellor of the Krill has invited the President of the Union and a delegation to come to the Krill homeworld, their capital city, in order to ratify this treaty. However, this is going on in the middle of a tense election on Krill, where the main opponent to the Chancellor is a populist figure that we've seen a couple times before in this series, Talea, the Krill officer who was on the ship that Ed and Gordon infiltrated in Season 1. She was undercover as Ed's girlfriend through several episodes of Season 2 before kidnapping him. Both times Ed let her go. And here now Talea is running on a platform of, this treaty is bad for the Krill, and if we win, the treaty's dead. So there's that whole thing looming over this treaty. However, there's the Chancellor of the Krill is like, oh no, she's a fringe candidate. There's no way she's going to win our prediction and say, I'm still a done deal to stay Chancellor, so come on over, we'll sign the treaty. So the Orville is chosen to be the transport for the Union President to bring them to Krill. They get down to Krill, it's like, oh yes, all right, welcome to Krill. However, the election is being counted literally as they're arriving. And it turns out, surprise, surprise, the election did not go the Chancellor's way, and Talea is then elected the Krill Chancellor, which of course means, bad things for the landing party that's already down there, as well as the now former Chancellor, who, ends up with his head on a pike in the middle of the square, bad. And the Union officials are in prison, including Ed. Meanwhile, Kelly's left in command of the Orville. The escort ships that peacefully escorted the Orville to the Krill homeworld suddenly say, no, prepare to be boarded. So they have to shoot their way out of here. However, before leaving, Kelly gives Lamar the order, initiate Directive 21. And, we see, all right, are you sure 21? So, yes, go to sickbay and Claire will give you a hand. And that's all we hear from them for a good long while. Then, meanwhile, on Krill, Ed and Talea have this, dialogue of, exploring their history. And Talea's like, no, I'm going to kill you all tomorrow. I basically promised my people. However, Ed, thinking he's going to get escorted back to his cell, and ends up being led through the city. Actually, he's like, "Well, where are we going?" And the guards are quiet, and his guards end up getting shot by another group of Krill, who then take him to a room off the beaten path, and we get the huge bombshell of this episode, namely that, Ed and Talea had a daughter named Anaya, who is, half Krill, half human, and obviously for someone who ran on a platform of, we got to keep Krill purity, this is something that, Talea has, she's kept her away, there's no contact, and, if she would be revealed, it would be, terrible. all sorts of bad consequences. So, Anaya's now the secret daughter, and Ed meets her for the first time, and presumably the only time. Who knows? We'll see what happens, in future episodes. And meeting up with this, Ed says, meets back up with Talia one last time, tries to appeal to her and say, no, we can make this work. We can show that peace is possible. And, that appeal basically falls on, deaf ears at that point. You can tell that Talia's kind of conflicted about it, but she ultimately sticks to her course of, no, I was going to let you go, returning the favor when you let me go, but now I got no choice. I got to kill you all. And, right as the execution, they're lined up with the crowd below or whatever, Kelly comes back to the Krill homeworld with the Orville with reinforcements, and a huge space battle starts going on above Krill, and they're like, okay, things are getting real here, and the president of the Union actually does get stabbed. However, two Krill end up throwing light grenades or whatever, not entirely sure what those things were, and they rescue the landing party, and it turns out it's Lamar and Claire as in Krill disguise, and we get a nice little chase scene through the Krill capital city to get to their shuttle. Meanwhile, the space battle's going overhead. There's a race between once they get back to the shuttle, to get the shuttle back in orbit. They have to avoid the big space battle in orbit in order to get back onto the Orville. Once they do, they all the Union ships quantum out of there, and this episode ends with leaving us with the implication of, all right, the peace treaty is dead at this point, but we've got to leave some lasting peace. And the Admiralty is like, we have the card of Anaya to play, but she's your daughter, Ed. We're going to make that call. We'll leave that call up to you, rather. And Ed's like, well, I don't want to risk her safety, but in all likelihood, that was the one and only time I'm probably ever going to see her. And it kind of leaves us on that heavy implication. So really, this episode was strong in the sense of it's a lot of character development. When we first see Talia up there, I did not expect the direction that it would go when it goes to Anaya. That was obviously the big bombshell, and I was not expecting that at all. And I think that was a really effective device. However, I think it's a little bit contrived, just because we obviously have the sci-fi metaphor, in the sci-fi setting of a contentious election with a populist candidate. Gee, I wonder what they could be talking about. But then we also go this hard right turn of yes, the Krill are a very religious society, and there's obviously strict views on abortion, and then that gets suddenly thrown in there, and they kind of pay a little bit of attention to it, but then they just kind of hurry off to the side, and it's like, well, okay, they make huge points. All right, the Krill are very strictly against abortion, and then Talia's like, oh yes, the Union, you murder wantonly with your children. It's like, okay, yes, you got both sides of the abortion argument represented there. However, they bring us up the good point of, if the Union's, very, the pro-choice, birth control, all that fun stuff, wouldn't the birth control in, whatever future this is, I forget what exactly this is, in the 26th century, I forget exactly what time period this is going in, but, when Ed and Talia in disguise were in the relationship, wouldn't they be using birth control to make sure that didn't happen in the first place? I mean, I know, birth control, preconception birth control fails now, but, this is supposed to be hundreds of years in the future. You'd think they would have perfected that by now. That's why I feel like that's a little bit contrived in order to, foster, conflict later down the road in this episode. But for what it is, I'd say it works out okay. We'll see how well it develops. The showrunners would be idiots if they just leave this as a one and done sort of plot thread. Obviously, we're going to see this again. We've seen Talia now. This is the third time we've seen her show up in the season. However, looking back, it was only the one episode in season 1, and then the one episode in full out disguise in Krill mode in that season. So hopefully she gets more appearances in this season to make it pay off better in the future. Because if it's just this episode and nothing else for the rest of the season with Talea and the storyline, that just feels like a weird choice in my opinion. I don't think they're gonna do that, but if they did, that would be a mistake in my opinion. But I mean, the other things that I kind of think were a little bit of a letdown. I mean, they build up so much that, this is the Krill City. You'll be the first Union officers to see the Krill homeworld. And they played like this really epic music as the shuttle under escort is flying through this really dense cloud barrier to get to the Krill City. And not only did we already see the Krill homeworld in the cold open when Talea's giving her speech to her followers, but the city itself is kind of generic, and I know there's only so many ways that you can design, a sci-fi city, but, for what they were already building up, it's like, that's it? This is all we get? So that's kind of a letdown, and maybe there was only so much they could do on that, but still. And also the design of, I guess the Chancellery building, the executive building, whatever you want to call it. When they walk into it, it's like, did they just copy paste like some Orville style, like Krill designs over the Ministry of Magic building from Harry Potter? Because literally, it's the exact same building setup in the lobby of the Ministry of Magic. It's kind of amazing, but. I don't know. That's my kind of the letdowns. But overall, I mean, the space battle itself, although we do kind of cut back and forth a little bit too much, the space battle itself looks incredible. Again, props to Hulu for upping the production budgets so that they can get the CGI of these space battles looking so well. Which makes it a real shame that at the end of this episode, when Ed and Kelly are on this balcony, where it's, I mean, yes, it's obviously a green screen, but for whatever reason, maybe the lighting was just way off, but it looks awful. The CGI in the last scene when they're on this balcony. I mean, I would take the balconies in the Star Wars prequels over that CGI. So I would say overall it's a bit of a mixed bag this episode, but probably more on the side of the strong than the strengths than the weaknesses, in my opinion. Because like I said. Very effective, plot, the bombshell, really effective, the plot threads, it'll be interesting to see where things go from here, because they're obviously setting up some interesting tension going along with, the Union and the Krill, and, obviously Ed and Talea, all that stuff. But, like I said, there's some weaknesses that do drag this episode down. But I do appreciate the humor, if only for the surreal image of Isaac walking into a Western bar with a cowboy hat and a fake mustache. Like, that was the one scene, like, they played that scene perfectly. I was like, oh, wow, I did not expect that. And, of course, the running gag with the Admiral be like, oh, when I called for Rose, I totally knew that you and Kelly were drunk. It's like, alrighty then. That was a good running gag. I liked that one. So, I mean, those are my main thoughts on the episode. Some things that I noticed that you may have seen before. Obviously, the main conflict in this episode, aside from the Ed and Talea's personal stuff, the plot around the two warring empires trying to forge a treaty, and sides on the one, the radical elements on the one side trying to disrupt it. Very similar to obviously Star Trek VI, the Undiscovered Country. You got that parallel going on here. When Gordon is trying to get away from the first Krill attack, where he's like, oh, the expanding helix maneuver. It's like, what's that? I don't know. I just completely made it up. And then it basically looks like they're just spinning. It's like, that made me think of the Phantom Menace, when Anakin's like, I'll try spinning. That's a good trick. And that played very much similar to that. And speaking of the prequels, the hover car chase at the end is very reminiscent of Attack of the Clones with the speeder chase there. Even the music is a little bit similar to to attack the clones, that specific scene. So maybe that was just a little bit of an homage, but I mean, I appreciated those. So overall, those are my main thoughts on this episode of the Orville New Horizons. What did you think of this episode? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What about analysis? Do you agree, disagree? Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate whatever audience I can get. Be sure to look for my next review of next week's episode of Orville New Horizons, as well as my upcoming movie and TV reviews, such as my next movie review, which will be for Thor: Love and Thunder, which comes out July 8th. Now we've dropped all 6 episodes of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'll be doing my review of that, as well as look for my upcoming reviews of Miss Marvel and Star Trek Strange New Worlds. All that coming up on my channel. And if you liked this video or any other video on my channel, please give me a like, share, and especially subscribe. I'd very much appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for watching, but just remember, there is nothing new under the sun. And yes, you have seen it before.